Welcome to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader, a podcast dedicated to discussing women's unique challenges in the tech industry. I'm your host, Limor Bergman Gross, and today I have a pleasure speaking with Boomie Odumade. Boomie is a senior director of engineering, and she has over 20 years of experience in the tech industry. She's going to share her inspiring journey moving from Nigeria to the United States, her initial struggles with computer science and how she overcame them to build a successful career in technology. Bumi also discussed the importance of embracing change, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, and the power of authentic leadership. She provides valuable advice for women facing challenges in the tech industry, particularly around building inclusive cultures and supporting one another. You definitely don't want to miss this episode. So let's dive in. Hi, Boomy. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Limor. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And I want to start off maybe with talking about your move to the US. So you are from Nigeria. Tell us
Yes.
a little bit about the move and how it was starting your career here in the US.
So the first move to the US, I was actually a kid, and I had elementary school in Minnesota. What most people know about Minnesota is it's very cold. So I had elementary school there, went back to Nigeria for high school, and in high school I was really interested in science and math and those things, which wasn't that common for girls, but that was me. And I wanted to come back to the US for college. Thankfully, my parents agreed, and I came back to Minnesota, back to the cold, and got a bachelor's in mechanical engineering. And in terms of, going from there to being a leader, when I graduated with my bachelor's, I was an alien, and it was hard to get jobs with just a bachelor's. So I got a master's in computer science, and I've been working in software ever since. Now, one thing I want to mention about that is during my bachelor's, I had a computer science class and I hated it. I
Oh,
had
really?
a semicolon in the wrong place, 200 compile errors, and it was frustrating at first. But the more I learned about it, the more interesting it got, the more I wanted to learn how to make computer programs do what I wanted them to do. And so it's interesting that I've been in the field this long, but I actually hated my first computer science class.
Hmm. Well, I'm happy to hear that it didn't discourage you.
Thank you. I tell people that sometimes your first impressions aren't your final impressions. Of course, if you really don't like something, don't do it. I initially wanted to be a doctor, but I don't like blood, But on the other hand, my first impression of computer science was just temporary frustration.
So what helped you continue with that?
Well, I've always been somewhat curious, and not somewhat, I've always been curious. And, and I also believe in feel the emotion and do it anyway. So whether that's feel the fear or feel the discouragement. And so my early curiosity, I'm like, well, I want to understand why that happened. And I want to understand more about how to make it do what I wanted it to do. There's a saying in computer science that computers don't do what you want them to do, they do what you tell them to do. So I wanted to learn how to tell the computer what I want so it does what I want.
Perfect. And you come from very different kind of a culture, weather, like everything
Yeah,
is very much different. How was it like for you?
it was an adjustment. And in Nigeria, it barely gets below 70 degrees Fahrenheit. In Minnesota, it easily gets below negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 100-degree difference.
Wow.
So, and when we came for elementary school, we actually came in December, which is one of the worst, coldest times in Minnesota. So the weather was an adjustment, learning to layer, learning to deal with the cold. The culture was also an adjustment. So, from the culture difference, there's a different way of speaking, a different way of assumptions. For example, there are different words that mean different things between the places. There's so the culture part was also a challenge. But one thing I like when I came to college in Minnesota is the Office of International Affairs actually had sessions to help international students get over some of the culture shock.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Can you share your experience starting working as a software engineer? How was it like?
Sure. So when I got my master's, technology was becoming more and more parts of businesses. So it was interesting and cool. I went to career fairs and my first job was actually at a paint company. When I give mentoring presentations to youth, I show them a picture and remind them that technology is everywhere. And, in the first few jobs, I mean, actually in all jobs, I learned a lot and I continued to learn. One thing that I also tell people when I mentor is that technology is always evolving. So when I got my master's, Java wasn't really a thing yet, or if it wasn't that popular. But I think that when I started hearing a lot about Java, I got certified in it, and I think that may have opened even more doors than my master's in computer science.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to that. A lot of the things, at least for me, a lot of the things that I learned in college were
Mhm.
not so applicable to what I've done. And I learned most of it on the job.
Yes, yes. You definitely learn a lot by doing, especially in computer. Every language has you try hello world first because reading it isn't going to give you the knowledge. You have to apply it as you learn. And if you can apply it at the job, that is the best way to learn.
Yeah, and I think another thing that you mentioned kind of got me thinking is that you never stop learning.
Goodness, no. I learn every single day. I make new lists each month of the things that I want to learn. I mean, partly because I like learning, but in technology, if you don't like continuous learning, it's not going to work because things change a lot. Sometimes they are big changes like, AI. Sometimes they are smaller changes like, you know, updates to a language you already knew or changes in how the cloud came on the scene, in the around 2010, or the cloud came on the scene about a decade or two ago. So there's always a chance to learn, and learning is important to keep you just to even keep doing your job, not to mention advancing if that's what you want.
Absolutely. If you are not willing to learn, and I would even say constantly getting out of your comfort zone, like because something new comes up, and I notice some people that have the tendency of like they want to stay with the familiar.
Yeah, yeah. As humans, we don't like change. As technologists, we have to embrace the change. A saying somebody once told me that I firmly believe is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Getting outside your comfort zone is how we grow. One thing that I've done at a few jobs as a leader is I have a presentation that I share with my teams where I try to explain the application or system to them. I let them know upfront that this is my understanding, it's probably going to be wrong, and I want to know where parts of it's maybe going to have some mistakes in it, and that's okay. I want them to correct my understanding earlier rather than later. And because one good way to know if you understand something is if you can explain it to other people. So it also lets them see that I'm not afraid to say what I don't know. I would rather know the thing rather than put on a front that I do when I don't. And the people who report to me have appreciated that. And some of my peers and other leaders have said that's a master class in getting comfortable being uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Because I think that at least when I started managing, I thought that I have to have all the answers, and I felt very
Right?
uncomfortable being in a place that I don't know something. What will people think about me?
It's very nerve-wracking, and especially, especially as women, because there sometimes is already the impression that we were hired not for our merit or knowledge, but to check boxes. And so we may feel that people are watching us or people are doubting our knowledge. So it is uncomfortable. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm uncomfortable doing that. But I try to find the right balance of letting people know the skills I do have and what I don't know, and reminding people that nobody knows everything. We're all gonna learn from each other, teach each other. We're all gonna make mistakes. And so I've had to work on shedding that discomfort.
Absolutely. And this is very courageous, being willing to say, hey, tell me where I'm wrong. I
Thank
don't have all the answers.
you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. It is, like I said, feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about, how you began managing teams and what's your leadership style.
Sure. In terms of how I began managing teams, I was asked to be a manager. I didn't want to be at the time. I just wanted to code, But my first few management jobs were more hands-on. So there was management, but you were very much player coach in the code, doing all the things in addition. And that's okay if you have very few directs and if you are skilled enough to do the work without being a blocker. Which my early jobs, I knew the system, so that was fine. As I continued to be a manager, I enjoyed it. So I've done that, and in the 20ish years that I've been a manager, there are times that I have been more in the code, and there are times that I've been further away from the technology, especially if I have like 18 direct reports, which I've had before. Um, so in terms of my leadership philosophy, I believe in empathetic leadership. I believe there's a difference between being a manager and being a leader. And I believe in being a leader regardless of what your title is. We're still called manager and, director but to me, a good leader inspires and empowers. I don't like telling people what to do. I'm the oldest, but I've never been bossy, you know. And so my philosophy is, lead by example, lead by inspiring. I seek win-win situations. A lot of times people will think, well, if I do this, we can't do this, or it's me versus you. And so many times there are win-win situations if we look for them. So I start by assuming I can find those win-win situations. And if not, then I work on how to address it. I've made people happy with a no, so it's not. And as a leader, I care about both the people and the company, the company business, etc. The people help the company get where it's going. Without the company, the people don't have this job at least. So I really look to find those balance again, win-win situations. Um, I, you know, believe in treating people right. I'm gonna believe that anyway, but when you treat people right, they will sometimes go above and beyond. I've had, for example, at a job, where we would occasionally need people to work late night, I would put a volunteer sheet out and we'd get too many volunteers,
Wow.
and then have to, like, okay, we've got enough volunteers. Thank you all. When you treat people right, they will come through when you need it. So, so in some way, I believe in being the kind of leader that inspires and empowers and seeking those win-win situations and caring about the people as well as the business.
I agree with every word you said. I mean, and I think I also, when I started managing younger people,
Hmm.
I felt even more so that you really need to be a leader and use influence rather than authority.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, early in my career, you did something because the boss said so. I remember one situation where the boss had said I needed to come in on a Saturday, and I did because the boss said so, and then they didn't even show, and yes, with the younger people, it's definitely yeah, it's definitely a case of inspiring and empowering. It works for me though. I prefer to lead this way. Early in my career, when I was leading at the type of places that had more authoritative management styles, did it, but it was hard, So I like that more of the more leadership styles these days are more what I want to do anyway. I mean, I adjust my exact leadership style for the company, the people, the situation we're in. But I tend to default to servant leadership combined with situational leadership.
That's wonderful. And I want to ask you, I mean, this is great when everything works. How
Yeah.
how do you handle situations where, like you said, saying no and be happy with a no, or like how do you handle situations where really, I mean, you try to go with the win-win, you try to
Mhm.
really doing it by influencing, but kind of, it doesn't work.
It doesn't always work. It does. I would be lying if I said that it did. So dealing with difficult situations, I'm gonna step back a little bit to say when you meet new coworkers, especially directs, but peers, boss as well, I think it's important to get to know them, as people, what they do, and start to build that trust. That builds the foundation for the rest of your working relationship. And but even if you do all that, and even if you were BFFs, I tell a lot of my coworkers, "You're my best friend," and yes, I say that to everybody here. Um, and even if you do that, difficult situations are going to arise. We're human. We're leaders. So when those situations arise, I it's hard, but I make sure that I have that difficult conversation. Um, and the exact the exact situation is going to dictate when, how. But what some of the guidelines that I think apply to all is, check, make getting as much information as you need, not so much that it looks like you're a detective, but getting yeah, getting enough information to understand what you believe the problem is. Um, Having an open conversation, with active listening, and seeking that win-win. But if you can't get to the win-win, then determining what the next step is. So, for example, I mean, it's a small example, but yeah, I worked at places where we had to put out of office in 3 places. It's annoying, but at the end of the day, there was a reason that there wasn't one place. And so when people would complain about it, I would explain the reason. I would try to get them to do it. But if they couldn't, I'm sorry, but these are the rules, so please do so. And a feedback example, because giving constructive feedback is one of the hard things all managers should have to do. But I would argue that we should all be giving feedback to each other anyway. When having to give constructive feedback to someone, you know, it can go badly sometimes. And in one situation where I was getting a lot of defensiveness, I, I ended up sharing with the person some resources on the importance of feedback and how to receive it. And and surprisingly, they came back and thanked me for that and said it was helping not only their professional life but their personal life as well. You know, it's not all win-win. Sometimes you get into situations that don't work out. And I don't necessarily mean firing and pips, although those happen as well. I mean sometimes where the relationship seems where the relationship is deteriorating. And in those cases, work hard to repair the relationship. And if it still doesn't come back, we figure out how we work together, you know, even if we don't have the trust or we don't have, or we would rather not, how do we still work together in those situations?
Yeah, and feedback is very important, and many managers, especially starting out, really try to avoid, at least, when there is a constructive feedback. Do you have any
Yeah.
tips?
Yeah, remember that feedback is important. None of us are perfect, not even me, especially not me. None of us are perfect, and we can't grow if we don't know what we need to grow, how we need to grow, and what we're doing wrong. So I had to switch my thinking of feedback as something that's going to upset someone. It still might, but it's a gift. It's how we grow. And so my first tip is understand the importance of feedback. Share with people the importance of feedback. When people understand why it's important, they don't fear it as much. And another tip is make it something regular. I posted a blog on LinkedIn recently titled Performance Reviews Can Be Empowering. And one of the biggest tips I have in that blog is if you're getting feedback all the time, the performance review doesn't become a scary thing. And, there should be no surprises on the performance review. But even in my weekly one-on-ones, I have a section for feedback I may have for someone, but also feedback they may have for me. As a leader, sometimes people are afraid to give you feedback because you're the boss. And so by having it as one of our agenda items, they know that it's okay to give me feedback and I'm seeking it as well. And then another tip is the delivery of the feedback is very important. There are multiple models you can use for that. SBI is one of the situation behavior impact is one of the things. You need to have enough, in my opinion, enough information to know this is a trend and not just somebody having a bad day. And you need to be able to show the impact. And ideally, you can work on what, if anything, changes, from there. And, and determining whether, depending on the type of feedback, determining whether you need to follow up. Some things are okay, I'm going to try, I'm not going to follow up. Other things we will follow up. As a leader, if I've given someone feedback and I see that they are improving, say that,
Yeah.
tell them, don't make it a one and done thing, I remind people that when there's an area of improvement, it's not a switch. It's a journey. And that journey is not necessarily linear. It can go up and down. So it's important to acknowledge the improvement, but it's also important to acknowledge that, humans are creatures of habit. And sometimes w- things can things can be improving and still dip, and it doesn't mean, oh, we failed at addressing this feedback now. It's just part of the journey.
Absolutely, yeah. And sometimes, when you give feedback to people, they need some time to acknowledge.
Yes. It goes back to knowing your people. And one of the things I've started doing recently is asking my directs, when I have constructive feedback for you, do you want like a heads up or do you want me to just dig into it? Because everybody's different. Some people, if you say, hey, I need to talk to you about feedback tomorrow, they're going to be freaking out and overthinking all night. And other people need that to get ready. So again, no cookie cutter approaches. I try to get to know each person so that I'm addressing it in a way that they are more likely to receive it.
Absolutely. And you also talked about empathy, and empathy is a big word.
Yes.
And a lot of times people don't know what it means. So, do you have any insights on what it means to be an empathetic leader? At least what it means to you?
Mm. So what empathy means to me is, first of all, I'm being kind, which is not the same thing as nice. Kindness, back to what we talked about with constructive feedback. Is it nice to give constructive feedback? Maybe, maybe not. Is it kind? Absolutely. Yeah. So empathy means being kind, and caring and showing it. And also that I'm acknowledging that it's not about what I feel the same way in this situation. Doesn't matter. The What matters is this person feels this way in this situation. And it's not for me to say whether that's right or wrong, but it's for me to use that to determine how to lead and how to address if there are issues, or how to keep them motivated and inspired and empowered. So that's that's what empathy means to me. And I mentioned caring, which can also be an overloaded term, So when it comes to caring, I believe that I can genuinely care about the people I'm working with and also genuinely care about the company. Because like I said earlier, we need both to grow as a company. And I want to stress that one of the people that you should care about is also yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup. And that's definitely something that I've had to learn. I mean, I learned later than I should have, but as I lead people, I remind them to care about themselves as well, to take care of themselves. So that's what
Absolutely.
let me make sure. I want to make sure I answered your question. So if there's a part,
Absolutely, yeah. You answer it perfectly. And I think that what you mentioned, that you can't pour from an empty cup, is very, very important. I want to emphasize that,
Mhm.
especially for women, especially for mothers. And
Yeah.
because I know that personally, I used to take care of everyone else, right? Focus on my
Mhm.
career, focus on
Mhm.
my kids, my husband, all the chores. And then what about me?
Yeah, it is hard. Like, I mentioned I'm the oldest of six. Oh, I didn't mention that. Okay,
No,
I'm the oldest of six, so I've always had other people in the family to care about, and I've been a leader for a long time, which also lots of people to care about, and family and friends, and it can get really hard to remember to self-care. And one of the things that I turned my phone off so you can't see it, but I literally have alarms on my phone now, one to stop working so that I have at least 45 minutes when I'm not working and not momming. And then I have like a 15-minute reminder for daycare pickup, and then the actual daycare pickup, which says, go get kiddo for real, so that I'm not late keeping the daycare staff there. Yeah. So, um, the go get him for real alarm's been there for a while. The other alarms to give myself time are newish. But in that time, step away from the computer, go lounge in a chair, play a game, or do something that is self-care that I don't want to say it's not productive because it actually is productive to take rest so that you refresh, but doing something that's not about work or mom and it's just a chance to regenerate, refresh.
Yes, that is just about you.
Yes, yes,
Something for you. For some
something.
people, it will be resting. For some people, it may be, I don't know, jogging outside. For some people, it may be cooking. For some people, would be something else.
Exactly. It's about what works for you, and you don't need to justify that to anybody else. I do believe in getting enough exercise. And even though I used to be co-founder of a startup that made fitness fun, for me, that I try to get my workouts in the morning and, ideally walk with kiddo as well. So the workout for me and then the walk with us, I try to do that in the morning, partly to get it out of the way, but also because I'm unlikely to use my me time for a workout.
Yeah, but I remember that in one of my jobs, I remember I started working at VMware, and they had in this site where I was managing, they had this lunchtime that
Hmm.
many people took for
For workout.
exercise. Yeah,
Yeah.
for workout. Yeah,
Yeah, I had an employer where I was consistent with the lunchtime workouts. You know, um, but when I'm the most consistent, it's in the morning.
me too.
It's the whole, get it out of the way, and I sweat from workouts. So if I do it before I shower for the day anyway, that's done. But if I do a lunchtime workout, then I also have to re-shower. And so, but it's what works. Some people need the gym. I don't, if I've ever had a gym membership, it was short-lived. I don't want to spend, I would rather be working out than commuting to go work out. So I tend to do YouTube videos in the morning or, for a while I was really good about jogging and even like did a half marathon annually.
Wow.
Now it's more about my getting the workout. I salsa dance, but that's only a few nights a month. So I mean, if you look at my step counter, it doesn't look good, but I'm doing workouts that are not counting on the steps.
So I wanted to ask you about your advice to other leaders, especially for women, but
Mhm.
not just, how to build an inclusive culture. And especially, when you have teams of people from different backgrounds, including also people of color, including Black people, Black women.
Yeah, so in terms of building an inclusive culture from different backgrounds, I think it's a combination of the hiring, the onboarding, and the day-to-day. Right. So, in terms of hiring, I think it's important when you're recruiting new people to be honest about where you are and where you want to go. For example, I don't mind being the first or the only. I've been the only so much in my career that I just don't notice, but some people do mind. So it's important, if someone would mind being the only, that's information they should have up front. Also, when it comes to hiring, you're hiring them for their qualifications. We don't want to feel like tokens. And so, make sure you're looking at those qualifications. And when it comes to onboarding, typically, onboarding, I'm gonna finish a blog about that soon too, but you want to make sure everybody feels welcome. And this includes everyone, but especially when it's women and women of color, we may be dealing with assumptions. You may have hired us for our skills, but other people may think you hired us to check boxes. So it helps to onboard properly, but also ensure you're amplifying the messages about the person's qualifications. And in the day to day, like, I don't want special treatment, but at the same time, I may be experiencing I mean, people of color and women may be experiencing different treatments than others. So it's it's important to be mindful, I mean, again, we should do this anyway, but it's important to ensure the day to day is a place that's psychologically safe, that's equitable, that's, we are paying attention to the aggressions, because we can experience both microaggressions as well as macroaggressions. So we being mindful of that and encouraging everyone to bring their whole selves and their experiences, but also realizing that, as a Black woman, I'm not speaking for the entire group. I mean, for example, I don't like wigs or weaves, but some do. And so don't lump groups together because groups are not a monolith. And I will say, I've had a number of Black women tell me that they felt extra pressure to do a great job because they felt if they failed at their job, the company would never hire another Black woman again. So just realizing that there may be pressure that people feel, based on experiences and statements. I mean, I've heard some of those statements myself. And most of all, believe people about their experiences. If someone's not treating you a certain way, but they're treating me a certain way, that's possible. So it helps to be believed. I've had situations where I wasn't believed. I've also had situations where I brushed things off and it was someone else who said there's bias here. There's bias in the way you're being treated. We need to address that. So having the allies, be an ally, when you can. And I learned recently of this phenomenon called pet to threat, which affects a lot of women of color. And so beware of that. I'm not a threat. Don't really want to be a pet either,
Yeah,
Um, so the summary, bring your whole self, support, treat us like other people believe us, and um, and then if you have the funds, have the employee resource groups so people who identify can talk to each other.
that's very important too. Wow, this is incredible. And I can't believe how time flies. And I want to make sure that I ask you if there's anything else that I have missed that you would like to share.
I, I mean, said we can't cover everything in a half hour. So the one thing I tell everyone is find a mentor. Mentorship makes the world go round, and you can be a mentor, and you can be a mentor and mentee to the same person. So it's really important to have that fresh, to have a fresh perspective, to have someone you can talk to about your career goals. And so mentorship's important.
Absolutely. Wow. Incredible. Thank you so much, Bumi, for being here today. And before we part ways, let us know how people can find you.
Yeah, LinkedIn's the easiest way. I accept almost all connection requests. So my handle there is my last name, Odumade. So,
And
so happy to do that.
I'll put the link and anything else that you would like to share on the show notes because you mentioned several articles. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader. What's coming up next? In the next episode, we'll explore the journey from software engineering to tech leadership with Vidya Narayanan. Vidya is an inspiring leader at Google, and discover how Vidya transitioned from her initial dream of becoming a doctor to becoming a tech leader who thrives on challenging the status quo. Join the conversation as Vidya shares her insights on navigating career shifts, seizing opportunities, and breaking stereotypes in the tech world. Don't miss this engaging conversation about growth, leadership, and innovation.